many guns has the ATF lost?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Who showed up here said one thing that felt good about doing this kind of event was that they felt empowered.
Weim says the Missouri law exposes people to greater harm by interfering with the federal government's ability to enforce firearms regulations.
Types of disputes that would be settled by people yelling at each other, maybe engaging in a fist fight, are being settled with guns.
Conventional wisdom was we would never get any Republicans to support gun legislation, period.
They're all up in arms about it and has everything to do with your right to bear arms. So what the ATF is going on? The stabilizing brace and its history. When the arm brace was first developed, it had the appearance of a shoulder stock. Attaching a shoulder stock to an AR-style pistol with a barrel length under 16 inches turns the firearm into an NFA weapon, specifically a short-barreled rifle, otherwise an SBR.
Today, we say more than enough. We say more than enough.
No Democrat has ever tried to get anybody's guns. I mean, that's just a lie that they tell, and y'all ought to stop perpetuating their lie.
We can reach compromise on guns. We ought to be able to reach compromise on other critical issues, from veterans' health care.
To have their firearms, which are being held by the government, transferred to a third party for the third party to sell.
Atlanta, Buffalo, Uvalde. And for the shootings that happen every day in the street that are mass shootings we don't even hear about.
Firearm and accessory manufacturers got pre-approval from the ATF to ensure these braces did not turn AR small firearms into SBRs. While the ATF took many different, sometimes contradictory positions on these items over the years, they initially decided the braces did not turn a small firearm into an SBR. So what changed? Over time, through private letters to firearm and accessory manufacturers, the ATF took the opposite stance, that some of the design features of the stabilizing braces would turn an AR-style pistol into an SBR. The ATF chose to flex its regulatory muscles through targeted, private, and informal decision letters, rather than through formal rulemaking procedures. These letters left the firearm owners of this country with a confusing regulatory framework and no idea how to navigate it. The ATF's current stance is also unclear. It seemed to take the following stance: rather than being used for its intended purpose, many stabilizing braces allow the user to purposefully shoulder a small firearm. Indeed, some of these braces are being marketed as such. These marketing approaches is contrary to the intended purpose of the stabilizing braces, and the ATF believes that an AR pistol with a stabilizing brace may now be restricted as an SBR. ATF pistol brace rule. In short, the rule would reclassify some existing firearms equipped with stabilizing braces as NFA items, resulting in the need to register the firearm and pay a tax. The ATF said it would make the determination by a totality of the circumstances approach. This means the determination would be made on a case-by-case basis depending on the characteristics of the gun itself. Additionally, the ATF did not adopt the worksheet formerly known as Worksheet 4999. However, many of the same criteria found in Worksheet 4999 will be subjectively considered when determining if a former pistol qualifies as an SBR. There are a few technical specifications to all of this, but in short, the ATF now considers stabilizing braces stocks. With that in the background, on January 13, 2023, the Attorney General signed ATF Final Rule 2021-R-08F.
I don't really see the purpose of letting other people that don't really know what harm they can do.
You specifically said that.
But I said...
What does mandatory mean?
I'm trying to say that...
Does it mean that prosecutors get a choice?
I would expect to see in the coming months and years is a lot of focus on whether or not enough places are deemed sensitive right now.
The Attorney General himself, Ken Paxton, tweeted saying, quote, "What we just witnessed is illegal."
Quote, "Factoring criteria for firearms with attached stabilizing braces, amending ATF's regulations to clarify when a rifle is designed, made, and intended to be fired from the shoulder." The final rule was published in the Federal Register on January 31, 2023. The rule outlines the factors ATF would consider when evaluating firearms equipped with a purported stabilizing brace or other rearward attachment to determine whether these weapons would be considered a rifle or a short-barreled rifle under the Gun Control Act of 1968, or a rifle or firearm subject to regulation under the National Firearms Act. The rule's amended definition of rifle clarifies that the term designed, redesigned, made, or remade and intended to be fired from the shoulder includes a weapon that is equipped with an accessory component or other rearward attachment, like a stabilizing brace, that provides surface area that allows the weapon to be fired from the shoulder, provided other factors, as listed in the definition, indicate the weapon is designed and intended to be fired from the shoulder. Definitions and exceptions. This rule does not affect stabilizing braces that are objectively designed and intended as a stabilizing brace for use by individuals with disabilities, and not for shouldering the weapon as a rifle. Such stabilizing braces are designed to conform to the arm and not as a buttstock. If the firearm with a stabilizing brace is a short-barreled rifle, affected person had 120 days to register the firearm tax-free, which had been May 31, 2023.
So the third party can either keep them in trust or sell them and give the money to Mr. Henderson.
James commented on the decision, saying she's pleased. Remember, the law as it stands strengthens requirements.
And in many cases, the value of the firearms can be quite high.
Day for the most significant law to be passed since then, since the last 30 years.
And prohibits guns in sensitive places and requires background checks on all ammunition purchases.
Statute means what it says. It says that a convicted felon cannot possess a firearm.
I'd like to thank the leaders and members of the House and Senate for working together to get this done. I especially want to thank the families.
It doesn't say he can't sell a firearm that the government is possessing on his behalf.
Those were not the only options available to such firearm holders. If they didn't want to get their firearm registered or pay that fee, they could always remove the short barrel and attach a 16-inch or longer rifle barrel to the firearm. Another way had been to permanently remove and dispose of or alter the stabilizing brace such that it cannot be reattached. Or the owner could always turn the firearm into the local ATF office or simply destroy it. Options, options, options. Which one to choose? The rule's affectees. Better yet, who does it affect? Well, it affects tens of millions of gun owners, but according to the Arms, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosive Authority, it only affects unlicensed possessors or the federal firearms licensees, FFLs, not under the NFA as a Class 1 importer or Class 2 manufacturer SOT. Or it curtails activity of FFL importers or manufacturers under the GCA that are qualified under the NFA Class 1 importer or Class 2 manufacturer SOT, as well as certain governmental entities. It's pretty simple. All that's needed is to fill in what's called a Form 1, which is classifying this firearm as an NFA item. ATF waived the tax stamp initially, which normally would cost $200. They were allowing everyone to register their weapons without that $200 fee, but guess what? The deadline on the 120-day grace amnesty passed on March 31, 2023. The ensuing storm. The ATF said there are at least 4 million of these rifles on the market, which means the impact will be felt nationwide. Meanwhile, this ruling has the potential to tremendously change the firearms industry. It affects firearms that are in stock that unfortunately have to be turned into SBRs, so now selling those firearms that were originally purchased as a pistol would have been extremely easy to sell to a consumer. Now those firearms will have to be sold in a short barrel rifle configuration with the additional hassle of buying a tax stamp. It's an impediment for the firearm dealer as well as the buyer. Historical scrutiny. Stabilizing braces or pistol braces have been the subject of regulatory scrutiny since they were introduced circa 2012. Although the ATF initially said their application did not reclassify a pistol, the agency issued contradictory rulings when asked about shouldering the device. The ATF said many resolved that it was permitted, and brace makers started advertising stabilizing braces as shoulderable. So why the change of heart? The latest provocation came in 2021, and the ATF proposed the rule change in June 2021 at the direction of President Biden. He said he wanted to address the, quote, epidemic of firearm violence and targeted braced pistols because a culprit used one to slay 10 people and injure one more at a grocery store in Boulder, Colorado in March of 2021. The final nail in the coffin was that the shooter took the lives of 6 people at Nashville Christian School in March, also used a firearm equipped with a pistol brace. Firearm-loving Americans and the firearm lobby were deeply unhappy and considered it a naked attack on their freedom. The powerful machinery went into overdrive, and soon firearm loyalists were protesting at the gates of the Supreme Court. Start of a legal war. In February of 2023, 26 states teamed with gun groups to stop the federal government from enforcing a new rule that allows the ATF to regulate braced pistols as short-barreled rifles. In 2 separate lawsuits, the groups argued the decision exceeded the ATF's authority and that it was an attempt by the Biden administration to bypass Congress and force gun owners to register their firearms. Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton, who represents the Lone Star State in one of the lawsuits, stated that this rule is dangerous and unconstitutional, and he was hopeful that this lawsuit will ensure that it is never allowed to take effect. The Washington-based Gun Owners of America joined Paxton as a plaintiff. Together, they argued the ATF made a haphazard decision to reclassify braced pistols as SBRs, which are heavily regulated under federal law.
Because he doesn't care about separation of powers either.
The Texas House of Representatives just voted to impeach Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton.
How many guns has the ATF lost?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
But what is also true is that it is incumbent upon the United States Congress, the House of Representatives in particular.
Twime says the Missouri law exposes people to greater harm by interfering with the federal government's ability to enforce firearms regulations.
The extent to which this is an unconstitutional violation of our Second Amendment rights.
Plaintiffs in the other lawsuit include the Washington-based Firearms Regulatory Accountability Coalition, 25 Republican-led states, Bracemaker, SB Tactical, and others. It's also receiving support from the National Rifle Association. In January, a federal appellate court reversed the ATF's decision to regulate bump stocks, a device used to mimic mash gun fire when attached to a rifle. The court ruled the regulatory effort was administrative fiat and did not align with the administrative procedure. When the ATF issued the bump stock rule in 2017, it did at the order of then-President Trump, who responded to a shooting in which a gunman used the device to slay 60 people and injure hundreds more. Back then, gun groups like the NRA and the National Shooting Sports Foundation supported the decision, saying that the ATF had the authority to ban the item and Congress did not have to rewrite the law. According to the new stabilizing rule, brace owners have to register their brace pistols as SBRs or remove the brace from their pistols entirely. In short, brace pistols are being regulated, not stabilizing braces. Before the incident, the ATF had issued multiple classification letters saying the stabilizing brace would not qualify as an SBR if it were used as intended. The creators say the device is meant to go around a user's forearm for one-handed shooting. However, the ATF later argued that manufacturers modified and marketed brace pistols as SBRs. Within 2 days of the ATF publishing the new pistol brace rule, gun rights advocates filed multiple lawsuits and legislation in a last-ditch effort to stop the regulation from going into effect after 120 days. While one called it bureaucratic diktat and another called it administrative fiat, all the opposing parties argued the ATF overstepped its authority by reclassifying braced pistols as short-barreled rifles, SBRs, items heavily regulated under federal law. In statements, the parties also argued that stabilizing braces were created to help disabled veterans shoot pistols more efficiently, that federal agencies cannot write laws, and that the impending pistol brace ban infringes on gun rights. Just about the only difference is the people involved. Additional lawsuits. Since the final rule took effect in January, 7 separate cases have been brought in the federal district courts challenging its legality. Watterson versus ATF. In one lawsuit filed on January 31, 2023, a lone plaintiff, Blake J. Watterson, claims that he is being injured by the final rule because he owns a stabilizing brace. With the new rule, he will have to either register it or detach it from his pistol. The Texas Public Policy Foundation filed the case in a federal court in Sherman, Texas.
Blatantly denying the power grab being carried out by the executive branch yet again.
The uptick in violence has just been astronomical. The gun violence.
As a kid, I came out of a different movement, the civil rights movement.
Who showed up here said one thing that felt good about doing this kind of event was that they felt empowered. Pretty clear about the extent to which this is an abuse of the Administrative Procedures Act.
Is it a difficult question to understand?
Well,
I'm sure it's enormously high.
It's 36 per 100,000 people.
I just felt that I needed to be able to protect myself.
William Mock versus ATF. In a second case, plaintiffs William Mock and Christopher Lewis both owned brace pistols and had planned to buy more. The Firearms Policy Coalition filed the lawsuit in the Northern District of Texas. Plaintiffs William T. Mock, Christopher Lewis, Maxim Defense Industries LLC, and Firearms Policy Coalition Incorporated (FPC) have sued defendants Attorney General Merrick Garland in his official capacity, the United States Department of Justice, Director of ATF Stephen Dettelbach in his official capacity, and the ATF. Individual plaintiffs Mock and Lewis are Texas residents who own at least one brace pistol and would purchase others in the immediate future, but for the final rule's additional regulatory requirements. Maxim Defense is a firearms and firearms accessories manufacturer and retailer that specializes in stabilizing braces and brace pistols.
And having to tell her that other 9-year-olds were just killed in a shooting is horrific.
Get on the ground now!
I'm a federal agent.
917-110-3.
I'm a federal agent.
Get on the ground!
Field background checks could stop a lot of illegal guns going in different places in the country.
This shall not be infringed, and the word infringe means by banning parts on firearms actually is against the Constitution.
Affect us here, and it was such a breath of fresh air for the Second Amendment people.
It takes extraordinary courage for them to stand up here and retell the story.
Anti-gunners put in there to keep the guns out of the hands of lawful citizens in New York State.
The majority of Maxim Defense's revenues are attributable to sales of products now subject to the final rule. FPC is a nonprofit organization that exists to defend and promote its members' constitutional rights, advance individual liberty, and restore freedom through political and legal advocacy and public education. FPC's membership includes individual gun owners, licensed manufacturers and retailers, gun ranges, firearms trainers and educators, and others. Individual plaintiffs and Maxim Defense are members of FPC. Plaintiffs filed this lawsuit the day the final rule was announced and moved for a preliminary injunction 3 weeks later. They challenged the regulation on constitutional and procedural grounds and moved the court for a preliminary injunction or, in the alternative, for postponement of the final rule's effective date. Floridians and a gun store. In a third case, the plaintiffs include 4 Florida men and a gun store. Josiah Cullen, Brandon Kling, and Eric Meal all own and travel with braced pistols, while William Martin and his store, Second Amendment Armory, sell braced handguns. They filed their case in a Tampa federal court.
We are not finished. We are not finished. We are not finished.
The submitted firearm brace, when attached to a firearm, does not convert that weapon to be fired from the shoulder and would not alter the classification.
Not one more! Not one more! Not one more!
Distribution of 10 to 40 million of these braces and the implementation of your rule. Did Congress pass a law?
Gabriel Toscher versus ATF. The Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty, WILL, filed a federal lawsuit against the Biden administration on behalf of military veterans from Texas and Wisconsin. WILL is challenging the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, ATF's, new rule, which recategorizes up to 40 million pistols with stabilizing braces as short-barreled rifles. The lawsuit alleges the ATF's new rule violates the Second Amendment and the separation of powers, which prohibits federal agencies from making new laws without clear congressional authorization. The suit is filed in the Northern District of Texas.
To run enhanced background checks on young people under 21 trying to buy a firearm.
This government can protect its own people, except for 36 out of every 100,000 for murders.
Types of disputes that would be settled by people yelling at each other, maybe engaging in a fist fight, are being settled with guns.
I am just inspired by the next generation. I think it's a time for a big change.
Since you rewrote the rules of asylum based on the perceived degree of violence in these countries.
Selling more guns in the last 3 weeks than we did in the last 8 months.
But for me, and for most of you, here's what it really is. It's an important first step.
When somebody bump fires, think of this as a bump fire stock and able to move.
To be clear, this wasn't based on violence. This is based on threats, specifically to individuals, on gangs.
Filed in a federal court in Amarillo, Texas, is the only case with a plaintiff with a physical impairment. According to the complaint, Gabriel Toscher served the United States with a distinction as an infantry marine, deploying overseas in support of the global war on terrorism. After his service, Mr. Toscher served as a security contractor, protecting people and places all over the country. In 2020, Mr. Toscher was ambushed and shot 15 times in Minneapolis. He spent 85 days in the hospital, enduring multiple surgeries and requiring 20 pints of blood. To this day, 3 of the 15 bullets remain in his body. Mr. Toscher owns a pistol with a barrel less than 16 inches and a stabilizing brace, which he uses for personal protection and recreation. While Tasher and two others, Darren Brito and John Kroll, are all military veterans, Tasher was reportedly shot in Minneapolis after a domestic dispute with his girlfriend's ex-boyfriend. The legislature reacts. As for the legislation, 3 Republicans, Georgia Representative Andrew Clyde, Louisiana Senator John Kennedy, and Kansas Senator Roger Marshall, reintroduced the Stop Harassing Owners of Rifles Today (SHORT) Act. The measure would remove SBRs, short-barreled shotguns, and any other weapons from the National Firearms Act, which allows the federal government to regulate those items. They introduced an identical bill last year, but it never advanced. In mid-January, after the Justice Department announced the ATF would publish the rule, Florida Representative Matt Gaetz introduced the Abolish the ATF Act. As the name implies, the bill would eliminate the ATF. In an interview with Fox News, Gaetz explained he filed the legislation in response to the rule. He explained that he had a lot of disabled veterans in his district who enjoy pistol shooting and rely on stabilizing braces to be able to engage in the activity. A fight to the end. More than 20 Republican-led states, along with gun rights groups and a disabled Army veteran on February 9, 2023, sued the Biden administration over a new rule restricting sales of gun accessories known as pistol braces. In a lawsuit filed in federal court in North Dakota, the state said that the rule finalized earlier this year by the U.S. Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives was, quote, arbitrary and capricious, and violated the right to bear arms under the U.S. Constitution's Second Amendment. Pistol braces were first marketed in 2012 as a way of attaching a pistol to the shooter's forearm, stabilizing it, and making it easier to use for disabled people. However, many users found that the braces could also be placed against the shoulder like the stock on a rifle. The state said that in their lawsuit, however, that the rule in practice could affect anyone who uses a brace. We should not be making it harder for senior citizens and people with disabilities and many disabled veterans to defend themselves, West Virginia Attorney General Patrick Morrisey, who is leading the effort, said. Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton filed a similar separate lawsuit in federal court in Texas on Thursday. A group of veterans also filed a lawsuit challenging the rule in federal court in Texas earlier this month. Democratic President Joe Biden has championed tougher gun control measures and last year signed a national gun safety law.
Conventional wisdom was we would never get any Republicans to support gun legislation, period.
Are ones where, in fact, it's most likely that they should be bringing the highest and mandatory minimum.
Details of the law, but folks, listen at home. Here's a quick summary of what this law is doing. It's already allowing.
Demonstrating that blind loyalty to Speaker Dade Phelan is more important than upholding their oath of office.
Might end up being a message amendment because the President of the United States will almost assuredly veto it.
Legal proceedings. It had a snowball effect, and the shocks of the resulting opposition soon gained momentum. One case in the District of North Dakota is brought by the Firearms Regulatory Accountability Coalition, joined by attorneys generals from 25 different states, with 33 members of Congress as supporting amici. Another case in the Southern District of Texas is being brought by the Texas Attorney General, alongside the Gun Owners of America and the Gun Owners Foundation. In the third case, the Firearms Policy Coalition has joined with Maxim Defense, a manufacturer of pistol braces, to file a lawsuit in the Northern District of Texas. The most common set of legal challenges lodged in these cases characterize the final rule as a violation of the Administrative Procedure Act, or APA. The specific form of violation alleged differs across the cases, but they collectively include allegations that the rule is ultra vires, arbitrary and capricious, unconstitutionally vague, equitably stopped, and non-compliant with notice and comment procedures, among others. A legal war is launched. On May 2023, a federal appeals court temporarily blocked the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms and Explosives from fully enforcing a new rule regulating guns equipped with pistol braces, a popular gun accessory that has been used in some recent mass shootings. The scope of the court's injunction is likely to be limited, however, and is unlikely to prevent the ATF from enforcing the rule nationally. The Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, which covers Texas, Louisiana, and Mississippi, granted the injunction on May 23rd in response to a court challenge attempting to block enforcement of the ATF's rule. In granting its injunction, the appeals court appeared to only block enforcement against the plaintiffs in this specific case, Mock v. Garland.
That requirement for showing a heightened need for self-defense, that was the teeth of these permitting laws.
And within less than 15 minutes, you can walk out the front door here with a rifle or a shotgun.
American citizens in places like New Orleans and Baltimore and St. Louis begin to seek asylum in countries like Honduras and Guatemala.
I don't know if you're referring to any particular incident.
The plaintiffs include William Mock and Christopher Lewis, two Texans who own braced firearms, Maxim Defense, a company that sells firearms equipped with pistol braces, and the Firearms Policy Coalition, a pro-gun rights legal advocacy group. After the FPC requested clarification, the court wrote that the injunction also applies to members of the coalition and customers of Maxim Defense. Mock v. Garland is one of more than half a dozen pending lawsuits over the rule. In the days leading up to the May 31st deadline, 3 other federal judges in the Fifth Circuit followed suit and issued separate injunctions, barring the ATF from enforcing it against members of the Gun Owners of America, Texas state employees, and the Second Amendment Foundation. The rulings are a significant blow to the ATF's plans to regulate pistol braces, but they are not national injunctions and have only been issued by courts in the conservative Fifth Circuit. The agency is still able to carry out enforcement against other owners and sellers of pistol brace firearms. A ruling against the ban. It seemed to be working. In January of 2023, a federal judge in Texas temporarily blocked President Biden's new regulations on pistols with stabilizing braces in response to a lawsuit from gun rights activists on the deadline to register the weapons. Judge Drew B. Tipton of the U.S. District Court for the Southern District of Texas on Wednesday granted a preliminary injunction against the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives.
I don't have a gun, but I don't give a damn about anybody else having one.
The most serious readily provable offenses in cases where mandatory minimums are present because it's not warranted.
Giving domestic violence abusers a license to kill and essentially preventing the government from doing anything at all about it.
What changed is that item that was submitted was not produced and was not the item that was marketed.
The government quite properly charged him with several crimes.
Sensitive places doctrine was not at issue in this case and still exists.
But then it released him, apparently believing that a civil restraining order instead of pretrial detention was the best way.
He went on to say he looks forward to a quick resolution in the Texas Senate.
Predictably, Mr. Rahimi soon thought, to hell with your restraining order.
Who are prepared and carry a gun oftentimes have to make split-second decisions.
Aggravated assault with a deadly weapon against a different woman using a gun that he wasn't legally allowed to own, but obtained anyway.
Partially preventing the agency from enforcing its new stabilizing brace rule. The order came on the deadline before the rule goes into effect in response to a lawsuit filed by Gun Owners of America, GOA, and the Gun Owners Foundation and the state of Texas. Gun rights groups have argued in court that the stabilizing brace rule violates the Constitution by requiring millions of firearm owners to register their weapons or else be prosecuted as felons. Tipton's injunction applies to individuals employed directly by the state of Texas or its agencies and all members of Gun Owners of America. The ban left firearm aficionados and firearm lobbies reeling with ecstasy, and it seemed that this was just one battle they had won and the war was not over yet. The White House jumps in. The White House in June of 2023 renewed its support for the Biden administration's pistol brace ban, threatening to veto a resolution that has been linked to the House's conservatives' revolt. The House Committee on Rules convened to debate Georgia Congressman Andrew Clyde's measure, even as House Speaker Kevin McCarthy navigated intra-party squabbling spearheaded by the House Freedom Caucus, a voting bloc of some of the lower chamber's more right-wing lawmakers who mutiny blocking votes from proceeding on the House floor. The standoff has stalled several pieces of legislation, including a bill aimed at blocking the government from using federal funds to regulate gas stoves, and a separate measure that would increase congressional oversight on federal agencies. However, amid the uncertainty, the lower chamber's rules panel, tasked with bringing legislation to the floor, moved ahead with Clyde's measure. Democrats framed the move as an effort by Speaker McCarthy to smooth things over with the Freedom Caucus, which counts Clyde among its members. Nevertheless, House Republicans delivered a blow to the Biden administration's federal regulation on pistols with stabilizing braces, voting in favor of a National Rifle Association-supported resolution that aims to overturn the rule. Randy Kozak, executive director of the National Rifle Association Institute for Legislative Action, stated that the ATF's pistol brace rule is a clear abuse of power and could turn millions of good Americans who lawfully own these devices into criminals overnight. The NRA applauds the U.S. House of Representatives for passing Representative Andrew Clyde and Richard Hudson's resolution to block this unlawful rule and prevent the ATF from issuing a similar rule in the future. He vowed that the NRA is putting its full weight behind fighting the action by supporting HJ Resolution 44 and challenging it in federal court. But the resolution sponsor, Representative Andrew Clyde, claimed that the GOP leadership told him if he didn't support advancing the debt limit deal, the resolution would be tough to bring to the floor. House Majority Leader Steve Scalise has denied the claim and that leadership is working to bring it to the floor.
That Bruin is a thing from which the public must be protected. This is simply not true.
So other families will not have the experience and the pain and trauma that they had to live through.
For too long, states like New York told millions of citizens that their right to armed self-defense ended the moment they left their homes.
She proves you can run for office ending gun violence in the South and you can win.
Lawful gun owners are not the driving force behind criminal gun violence, and this is particularly true of concealed carry permit holders.
AK-47 is an automatic Kalashnikov model of 1947.
At the same time, as I outline in much greater detail in my written submission, they play a significant but underappreciated role.
You can prevent the next tragedy. You can save life. You can save families in the process.
The president, Joe Biden, meanwhile, made it clear that if the resolution reached his desk, he would veto it. The House Judiciary Committee was set to mark up a resolution to nullify the rule in March, but postponed it following the mass shooting at a Nashville, Tennessee. To them, the rationale is clear. Short-barreled rifles are more concealable than long guns, yet more dangerous and accurate at a distance than traditional pistols. They further went on to state that the gun industry had circumvented this long-standing law by manufacturing and selling so-called stabilizing braces that convert heavy pistols into short-barreled rifles. The NRA, state lawmakers, and other Second Amendment groups have battered the Biden administration with criticisms for subjecting legal gun owners to potential felony charges. The contention is that stabilizing braces transform a pistol into a weapon that's powerful and easy to conceal, Attorney General Mick Garland said when he announced the rule. It seems the Biden administration has decided to take on the powerful firearms lobby, mounting an attack with the conservatives in cahoots. Republicans employed the Congressional Review Act, which allows Congress to undo recently enacted executive branch regulations, to try and nullify the new rule that they claim has turned millions of gun owners into felons. The main sponsor for the measure, Clyde, is a member of the ultra-conservative House Freedom Caucus and the owner of a gun store in his district in Georgia. His proposal to overturn the ATF rule first came to the House Judiciary Committee in late March for markup, but his attempt backfired as House Republicans postponed debate of the measure after a gunman used a weapon with a stabilizing brace to fatally shoot 3 children and 3 adults at an elementary school in Nashville, Tennessee. Clyde reiterated that this rule doesn't just infringe upon Americans' Second Amendment liberties, it represents a dangerous government overreach by the administration. Congress maintains sole legislative authority, not government agencies, not the executive branch. House Democrats, on the other hand, defended the rule, saying it could save lives. Once again, Clyde claimed GOP leadership had blocked his resolution from reaching the floor as retribution for his no vote on a bipartisan agreement to lift the debt ceiling, which leaders denied. House Majority Leader Steve Scalise said he and Representative Tom Emmer, the GOP's chief vote counter, had been working intensely to ensure enough support to pass the legislation in the narrowly divided House. Republican North Carolina Representative Richard Hudson, who helped spearhead the measure with Clyde, slammed it as a blatant bureaucratic overreach that circumvented Congress. The resolution then headed to the Senate, which took a clear stand in favor of the rule.
Yes, good faith applications of Bruin will likely result in some favored gun control laws being struck down.
Thought it just like, wow, it doesn't fit the definition, it doesn't fit the rulings, but we better run this up the chain.
To the extent that Bruin threatens certain laws, however, these are generally laws that weren't very good at protecting the public in the first place.
Some months later, during an ATF audit, I was told the background check was now a non-approval.
At the same time, it's undeniable that Bruin does not threaten many of the laws that are most effective at protecting the public.
Because they like the outcome of the policy. The banning of a piece of plastic.
Post-Bruin challenges have succeeded in lower courts. The opinions and reasonings therein have been grossly mischaracterized.
Obviously, they're gone, but it will be an inspiration for us to do more. I'm not going to sign this bill into law.
Circuit decision in U.S. v. Rahimi is worth highlighting. As others have noted, the panel struck down a federal statute.
Fifth Circuit hears challenge of ATF crackdown. The newest development in this saga was gun rights advocates urging a federal appellate panel on June 29, 2023 to block enforcement of the rule that they say is vague and ambiguous. Non-compliance is not an option, with tough potential penalties for non-compliance being a fine of up to $10,000 and a maximum 10 years in prison. Republicans in Congress tried to repeal the rule, but their bill died with a 50-49 party line vote in the Democratic majority Senate on June 22nd. Still, opponents have gained traction in court challenges. A Fifth Circuit panel on May 23rd granted the Firearms Policy Coalition gunmaker Maxim Defense Industries and two owners of brace pistols an injunction against the rule pending appeal. But the injunction is limited to those litigants, the coalition's members, and Maxim's customers and family members of the two pistol owners. And the challengers say U.S. District Judge Reed O'Connor, presiding in Fort Worth, got it wrong when he denied them a preliminary injunction after finding they were unlikely to win on the merits. Their attorney Eric Jaff, a partner in the Washington firm Schaffer Jaff, pushed for a nationwide injunction in oral arguments Thursday, before a different panel of the New Orleans-based Fifth Circuit considering the case on the merits. In a 90-minute hearing, Jaff argued the rule violates the right to bear arms enshrined in the Second Amendment because, quote, a braced pistol is plainly a bearable arm. U.S. Circuit Judge Stephen Higginson, an Obama appointee, asked him to respond to the government's assertions the Second Amendment only covers arms typically possessed by law-abiding citizens, and short-barreled rifles like sawed-off shotguns, which the Supreme Court has determined are dangerous and unusual weapons, are not protected.
June of 2021, you changed the department's asylum rules so that it could apply to individuals with significant gang violence.
Most apparent here, a defense of the Second Amendment, which this most certainly is.
Weim says the Missouri law exposes people to greater harm by interfering with the federal government's ability to enforce firearms regulations.
We can expect in the future that more people will be carrying handguns on the streets in places like Los Angeles, Boston, and New York City.
As many of you out there, either parents, relatives, and/or victims yourself,
To do anything about what the president is doing to exercise that authority unconstitutionally, as was the case with student loans.
Because people buy hundreds of guns legally and then they sell them illegally.
They seem to have a point, though. Eric Jaff argued on point that the notion that a more accurate and more controllable firearm can be banned precisely because it's a better firearm gets it exactly backward. The challengers also claim the new rule is vague because in the 10 years before it took effect, the ATF resolved manufacturers' uncertainties about whether their brace pistols qualified as short-barreled rifles by reviewing their weapons and issuing them clarification letters. Jaff said people bought them assuming they were legal based on the ATF's letters, but its new rule gives the agency discretion to revoke firearm approval and force owners to comply with its licensing regime. Higginson asked Justice Department Attorney Sean Jonda how Americans are supposed to know if their pistols are exempt from the rule. Jonda replied they are exempt if they are too short with their attached braces to be shouldered like rifles, or if their braces are a soft material designed for strapping around the shooter's arms. U.S. Circuit Judge Don Willett pressed Jonda to respond to the plaintiff's argument that stabilizing braces make pistols more controllable and safer. Willett, a Trump appointee, cited the Supreme Court's 2022 ruling in New York State Rifle and Pistol Association Incorporated v. Bruin. The 6-3 majority found New York unconstitutionally restricted the possession of concealed guns in public and determined governments must show their gun restrictions are consistent with the nation's historical tradition of firearm regulation. Willett challenged if there is any history or tradition that would allow governments to prohibit individuals from making safety-enhancing improvements to a weapon. Jonda said short-barreled rifles combine the concealability of a pistol with the accuracy of a rifle, which Congress has determined is particularly dangerous. U.S. Circuit Judge Jerry Smith, a Reagan appointee, joined Willett and Higginson on the panel. The judges did not say when they would rule on the appeal.
In bending the pistol stabilizing brace to help his friend, a disabled combat veteran, at the shooting range.
You gave testimony that the brave ATF agents are the ones showing up at 2 in the morning after a burglary.
Do any of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle give a whit about separation of powers?
Connecticut delegation, which is incredible. I think on this issue and many others, you're the best delegation in the United States.
No guns were lost. They were stolen by an individual who's now in prison.
And of course, we've got a lot of criticism over this. So why is it not a machine gun?
In areas that are poor, mostly minority, there's a mass shooting.
Congress wants to change the law and come up with a new interpretation, then ATF will follow that new interpretation.
Battle is heating up. Not only have states refused to comply with the rule, but millions of Americans just stood up to tell the ATF, Biden, and the federal government to sit down, shut up, and stop infringing on their rights. Only 1% of people with braced firearms register their guns with the ATF. If you want to get specific and use the exact count of 255,162, that works out to be 1.02%. In all fairness, this figure doesn't represent those who surrendered their weapons, destroyed them, sold them, or reconfigured them. Also, some people own multiple braced firearms, but based on what happened with registration, the number of people who complied would still be minuscule compared to the number who didn't. The heat has also been turned up by the powers that be, and this issue has turned supernova, which might just swing the next elections. Only time will tell how the wind settles in the end. And that's all that we have for you today, folks. Join us next time on the next one.